Hey y'all, my name is Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. Oh, this is your host, Ann Wyatt, and super excited to have John Robison on the show today with Standard Data. John and I have already met in person, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But we met in person in Anaheim this past February at MD&M West, and it was really kind of cool getting to know him a little bit before that show. And hope to see you again, John.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fun show. I think we're going to try and do Automate this year, but basically see how kind
Automate's
of
going to be
things
a
align on the
great
calendar, basically.
event to attend. There's going to be a lot of really cool people there and also a lot of cool companies. I will be at Automate, so that'll be fun. It would.
Mm-hmm.
Really good to see you
Awesome.
again.
Well, for that reason alone, we should go, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like
Exactly. Yeah. No,
I feel like
obviously fun.
Automate is like one of those shows that you need to go to. Like it's like Hanover, right? You just like that's a bucket list show. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think for us, the rationale is we have a lot of customers in LA. Like basically, we're right now pretty geographically constrained where we haven't tried to expand beyond like the California region. So we want to go to Anaheim for everyone listening to context. M West was in Anaheim, California, so we had a lot of people we knew in Los Angeles. We could go to Automate. I think the biggest question for us is like, do we even have the capacity to expand beyond California? Like, I have no idea.
I love that, but
I wish we did, but maybe we don't. So
I love that you're kind of this young founder. You've got all of this energy. You're here to really change things up in manufacturing. I am fortunate enough to know that about you. But for those listening in today that, maybe they haven't quite had the experience of meeting the amazing John Robison yet, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Yeah, I can. So I think we can outline maybe first like the company and when it was founded, and then more importantly, why it was founded, and then what we're up to today. And maybe actually I'll start in reverse order. So I'll start with kind of what we do. So we work a lot today with manufacturing startups, so usually smaller companies. We're not working in any big companies yet. And our main goal is helping find talent. And so we usually connect typically college students with startups manufacturing. Mostly today in the Bay Area and Los Angeles, like I mentioned. We've seen a lot of companies the past 5 years in aerospace and defense, especially in manufacturing coming around that region. So they all need to hire, talent. And it's obviously pretty rare to have a lot of young companies building, operations in Los Angeles that are industrial in nature. And so there's a lot of talent mismatch there. So we're kind of helping solve that gap. But so that's the company we do today. We're basically a pretty traditional, we help match talent to companies, and our niche is startups and manufacturing in Los Angeles and the Bay Area. How we came here at all. So I originally was at Palantir, which is a pretty big software company for the past few years. And then at Palantir, we noticed all of our work with, we worked with all the companies manufacturing. So anywhere from defense to commercial manufacturing, like paper and packaging, all the way to, automotive. Almost every company we worked with was unable to actually staff their production lines. And this is a constant issue. And at the big company level, the solution is very often just to automate more of their processes. So we were coming as Palantir to bring in AI solutions to automate XYZ process. And then we kind of realized there's a really huge problem and thought we should have a company to work on this full time. So my co-founder and I left Palantir to work on this problem full time. And what we found though is that as a software engineer, you think the problem is as simple as we need to basically, just automate more processes and it'll all be fixed. And kind of like one layer deeper, you realize it's actually much more nuanced than that. And what big companies need and what small companies need are very different things. A big company where they usually have plenty of headcount, they do need to automate to some degree, and that's useful for them. But for small companies, it's a whole different ball game. And so we really realized that the software wasn't really the crucial value for small companies. It was actually just the people. Like, you need more people with the right skill set to do these jobs. And it's as simple as that. So I get more into kind of like the why and the how behind that, but the super high level is we help, small companies find pretty rare talent. And
I
it's
love
a
that. I
more
love that so
important
much.
problem to solve than
Oh,
just building like
I just
software
love that,
dashboards.
John. Yeah, I mean, people are the backstone of the industry, right? And of any company, and certainly of a product. So love
Right,
that point of view so much. I definitely want to get more
right,
into that. And I definitely think there's some people maybe that I can help connect you with. So
right.
remind me about that. But I have
Mm.
to welcome you in the
Okay, I
traditional
will.
Workforce 4.0 fashion with our very first question here. And I've got to know, do, do you like karaoke, John?
Amazing. I actually don't do it that much, honestly. I'm a pretty unfun
Mm.
person, I think, unfortunately. A big fan of like quiet nights in, reading books. I'm not a huge, unfortunately, out person. But if I did go to karaoke, I would say my answer I gave
Yeah.
your email is
Well,
probably the answer I would actually
you'd
do
have to
karaoke.
have to come
Yeah.
karaoke with us. It's a fun time.
Well, so my thing is this is like I'm pretty introverted and I like really don't like in general. I'm afraid to just go home and just kind of like decompress. But if the whole gang is going, I'll go to karaoke. And so like I'll always rally for a good time. But they're always very like rare events where like at a conference I'll like kind of get the energy up to do things like that. But when I'm like day to day routine, I just kind of want to go home and after a long week of a lot of conversation, I want to just kind
I
of
do know. I
decompress
do
a
that
bit and just
often,
kind of
John.
for the
I
weekend.
do that often. Well, if we were out in a big group like
Yeah,
that, what
yeah,
what are
yeah.
you singing? We got to know.
So this is unfortunately going to make me
I
seem
love
like
that
a
song.
complete, Gen
No,
Z, but I would say Mr.
fantastic
Brightside,
song.
and you're going to be like, oh my
I love
God,
that.
that's a great
I would.
song. I know,
Do you
it's a
think
great
so?
song.
I would sing
I'm
that
worried it
song with
makes me a little
you.
Gen Z to say that, but yeah. Actually, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is a universal song everyone loves. I feel like whenever it comes out of the bar, people all start singing in
Yeah,
unison. It's like
it's
a
what.
common
Yeah,
divide across generations.
yeah. Mr. Brightside is the song that represents what we need. As far as like it's like representative of the workforce, multi generational, just a banger. We'll have to think
Yeah, I
of
love
ways
that.
we can maximize the output on that idea. That's a good one.
Maybe Automate will do a video. We'll do some karaoke ad lib, and we'll see.
That'd be
Yeah,
fun.
we'll do
I'm
some
down.
John and
I'm
karaoke
down.
basically. We'll see how that goes.
For sure. Well, and I just love like this. I just love her. You're gonna have a good time if you go, and because the industry is full of such amazing people, and it is really the humans that make work fun, right? For sure. But when
Right.
you're like looking for talent and you're working with these companies, these startup companies, and you're thinking from this
Hmm.
human perspective and not the AI automation perspective, what are some of those skills that everyone is
Right.
that are going to be in demand with AI, with like automation?
Yeah, I don't want to get too tactile, but I have a lot of like very concrete answers. I think like one very top of mind is a lot of companies today. So I think especially for startups, I can't really again. I think my experience unfortunately is skewed by I worked a lot with big companies, a lot with small, but never like mid-size. Not really sure like the needs for mid-size, but for startups, they're always looking for high talent density. So for example, we had a company recently we were helping find technicians for technician role. I think traditionally would be seen as, high school graduate, basic skills. And the way to get that would say we kind of poach talent
Mm,
from, just
yeah.
like a Lockheed or a Northrop or a big defense prime that already has the talent today. But we basically usually go to colleges directly and we scope out like clubs. We go scope out like actual research labs and find people who are doing really cool work and research in machine shops, but aren't necessarily working yet. The thing what I find is that like these technician roles, the skills are really rare. But if you go to these places where people are doing their free time machining or composites work, um, they're actually great candidates for these roles. And so I think my long-winded answer to that is like I think the short answer is like the way we find talent today, we're always looking for like where are there people who
Mm-hmm.
are talented but like unexpected, like sort of like underinvested in, and no one knows they exist. Because if you're looking where everyone's looking, which is kind of like the role was technician and they're at like Lockheed for 5 years, they're gonna all have their inboxes full of recruiters. But if you go to people who are not necessarily obviously sought after, they're going to be a bit more valuable to find. You asked a different question, actually. I can't answer the wrong question. You asked the question, what are the skills you look for that won't be automated by AI? I think, again, for all these startups, all of
Yeah.
them are heavily using software in their operations, and they're all using AI in their operations. Like if you're looking at any of these companies, in Los Angeles today, there's a ton, and they are all using software extensively. So it's not about like automation isn't a bad word for them. It's how do you kind of empower the operator to use these software tools. So typically, I think like a company in particular, I don't want to say their name, but like, you're in this factory and the operators are all using state-of-the-art dashboards built internally by the company. And so you have to be well-versed in how to use software dashboards. You have to be well-versed in understanding like the AI lingo to some degree. You have to be well-versed in these sort of like core vocabulary concepts, but also have like the core competency of technician or an operator. And so I think like the general answer I give now, like my rambling aside, is if you ask them question, what skills you need, it's like, I think learning how to learn is being the most important skill coming forward. Because like as you're seeing acceleration technology of, both on the hardware and software side, you're just always going to have new tools available. And the people who can always learn new tools, new skill sets are going to be the ones who are most in demand. And those who say, we didn't do it in the old days that way, like we're going to do it something else some other way, like they're getting left behind. I think like in more and more companies, like from the top, like the CEOs, these startups are driving, we got to use the top tools out there. And so like, certain companies are sort of like entrenched resistance against new technology, the startups. So for a startup in particular, if your goal is to take a startup, you have to have the ability to learn really quickly and much faster than you ever would do at like a Lockheed or a defense prime, where they have a bit more entrenched processes.
Well,
Not to out Lockheed, like nothing
yeah,
wrong with Lockheed. I'm just
they're a
saying that there's a different
major
process
company,
between a startup
right?
and a big company.
They've been around for a very long time, right? Yeah,
Right.
I'm in Huntsville, so there's a Lockheed here.
Right.
But have you seen those reels? This is like so in the weeds over here. But like, have you seen those
Mm-hmm.
reels that are live, love Lockheed or something? Live, laugh Lockheed. I love those so much.
I have seen those. Yeah.
They
Those are
really
those are
are, but
funny.
they are a
Those are
legacy
great. Those are
company,
really funny.
and there's a lot of legacy manufacturing companies that are giants, Fortune 1000
Right.
companies, and all that. And it is really hard once you
Right.
get kind of so far along, or maybe it's even just like a machine shop that's been there since like whatever. It's a lot harder, it seems like, in my experience, because I've also worked with startups.
Right.
It's a lot harder for these legacy manufacturing companies to adopt technology and integrate technology because it's a brownfield system. And so with the
Right.
startups being greenfield, everything's new. You're
Right.
building a building from the ground up in a lot of cases. So it's kind of easier, I think, to implement some technology during that process. So, but yeah, I think
It totally
dashboard,
is. No, sorry. Go ahead.
leveraging
Yeah. Go ahead.
dashboards, computer dashboards and systems and interfaces like that is a great skill to have, even if, you are machining, you are on the shop floor, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say like if your background is only with hardware, having software skills is super useful. And the reverse side, if your background is only in software, learning hardware skills is very useful. And so in general, whatever your skill set is, trying to be more of a generalist, I think will usually be useful as you're kind of forced to do more tasks with technology going accelerating, you're getting, more tools faster. You should be able to learn quicker.
Yeah,
So having
absolutely.
a broader knowledge base will always
Absolutely.
be useful there.
Interesting. So I guess, when we're kind of
Yeah.
thinking about integrating some of these technologies and we're thinking about how we're closing the skills gap as well, we seem to really, we've just not done a very
Mm-hmm.
good job with that, in the past few decades, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have a lot of thoughts on that. Like, I think like the biggest issue, I've seen, I think we see all the time is a lot of people you meet on like the job seeker side who are incredibly educated,
Mm.
but just have like actually no hard skills. Like it's not like a candidate doesn't know, like they just haven't been given the training. Like I think there's a chasm today
Yep.
between what industry needs,
Yep.
what's taught in schools, probably never been wider. It's certainly as wide as it's ever been. And I think it's funny because on both sides, employers need talent desperately. Job seekers all want jobs. They can't find jobs anywhere. And that to me is the most like intriguing conundrum. Like if the answer to the workforce crisis was like we don't have enough people, it's just like a people problem, that's worrisome. Like we don't have like demographics. It's not the case at all. The case is like there is an insanely massive structural misalignment of skills across the country. And one simple reason is because like colleges probably aren't being forced to pay for their lack of outcomes. So like a college, you get paid whether the student, studies
Yeah. Yeah.
anything. I'm
Yeah. I
not
don't
gonna
blame you.
roast any majors. I don't want to get in that route yet. But like, there is, not, I would say not rigorous or very rigorous. It's the same degree and it's the same like GPA, but like your degree matters a lot. Like what you study matters a lot. And so in colleges, they can pump out degrees and they're all the same amount of money for them. So it's always better that they have more easy degrees because it just gives them more money. But it's really bad for the students. It's bad for the national, college debt. And it's bad for companies. It's actually good for basically no one. So I think like the national infrastructure
It's
around
frustrating.
education is extremely,
Yeah.
extremely crooked
Yeah.
today.
What I guess like what were your
You're right.
expectations when you graduated college? I don't really feel like my expectations when I graduated college were very aligned with the way that the workforce is structured, just in general.
But I actually had a unique experience because when I was graduating, so I actually agree where like I did a lot of like in school, like research. So I didn't really have much like work experience until like I always did every summer like research experience. I was never doing like an actual company. It was always like a government lab or a school lab. And so when I actually was trying to enter the job market, obviously I wanted to learn skills, but like what I thought actually was maybe like the positive example here is I did a coding boot camp. So they're usually like 14 weeks in structure. And it's basically the model is all just like a buy now, pay later system of like, you can't pay tuition right now, but we'll get you 14 weeks of hard skills plus, resume development plus help with networking with employers and exchange when you get your first job. You pay back over the course of 2 years. And I thought that was to me, I think actually that's still to me like my favorite mental model for how education should work is like college should probably be free. You should go to a school and you should just study. And when you get hired in a company after, you're paid back the school over 2 years, just a period of time based on like getting hired successfully. And the way boot camp works today is if you don't get hired, they don't get paid. And so they are, of course, like hyper aligned with your own goals. Their outcome is your outcome, which is people get hired, people get paid because they have useful skills. And so a boot camp is very kind of market driven, whereas colleges are driven by God knows what, So I probably got more. I got more bang for my buck probably from a boot camp for 14 weeks than I did for 4 years of college, which is depressing to both myself and my parents, certainly. But now
Yeah.
and now
And
you
just to
realize
clarify,
it's a
you're doing this
completely
now,
messed up system,
right? You've got this boot camp structure for folks. We should go over that. That's because that's important. Yeah.
I guess it's kind of a nice tie-in, actually. I think like, and what we're doing right now, to be very clear, is like we are ourselves like, so like right now what we're doing is if an employer needs a new grad role, we'll have them hire for free. And if they need experience role, find that person. It's the in-between of like some of our customers right now, they want to build out like a talent pipeline proactively. So they need to hire, one customer in particular, they need to hire about 30 people before end of the year for their new pilot facility. And so they know the roles it's a very niche industry. It's a very, it's basically it's a part supplier for aerospace, so I'll say. And so they know the industry is very niche and they need to upskill a lot of their workers who they don't have that skill set today. And so we are basically serving as the provider of, we are getting students onboarded who lack skill today. We're giving them existing MOOCs, so MOOCs, which are basically like online open source courses that anyone can use and we can pay for. So we pay for as a company, everyone's courses for them. We get all of them through the system. End of the 14 weeks, when they're all hired, we get paid at the end. But we're kind of taking on the risk of, we vet the students, we bring them in, and we get a course that is a good course for them, get them through the course, make sure they pass all the course success. And when they finish that, we then staff the employer, but we own all of the risk of vetting the students, make sure they're a good fit for the course, make sure they're actually going to be able to succeed if they get trained, and also paying for the training up front.
Yeah.
And only get paid when we
when they get hired
eventually.
super helpful and super useful for companies. I think one of the most
Right.
frustrating things as a recruiter, and probably with what, you guys kind of encounter as well with standard data, is when you're looking at these job descriptions and it is like an entry level position and it's like, we want somebody with industry experience and we want somebody that's been doing this for like 5 years. And I mean, it's like, why do you
Right.
need that? You know, why do you need that?
Mm-hmm. It's just kind of funny because actually, what we actually do, which is kind of maybe like a bit of our technology, we take someone's job description and basically create like a rubric out of it, like a scoring checklist of like how would you actually quantitatively score kind of based on all the points. And what actually happens is when you start dinging, people get dinged for kind of dumb things, and then the employer realizes actually it was actually I don't care about that at all. Actually, like actually we can remove that weight from that score. So I actually think the more you can actually really quantify
Mm-hmm.
scoring people based on some sort of concrete metrics versus just like reviewing a JD and just like saying, like, here's my general like read. I think like quantification will always give more confidence and like help you clarify what you should be doing in the first place. Like I love this example. It's actually one of my favorite candidates I met. So he had an awesome
Nice.
background. He had worked in the U.S. Navy, at SpaceX, and then at Joby, like a bunch of like really good startups basically for the past like 10, 20 years. He was an early employee at SpaceX and he worked at several other companies, all startups in this role. And he couldn't find a role past a year. Like he is like literally a gold standard candidate, couldn't find a role, have been looking for looking for like 8 months to say. And he was lacking this one skill that this company needed. And we showed the rubric to the candidate, and they're like, yeah, he's like a Navy veteran. To all these companies, he has missing this
Yeah.
skill. And the CEO is like, honestly, I don't care about that at all. Like, who cares? Like, scratch that. Like, what really matters is the guy has all these other experiences that are really rich. But I think like my point is the more you can really quantify these things and show like numbers to the point system, it makes it to the employment for real. Like I see why that matters, why that's actually a dumb bet included in the first place. So it's like helping the employer see what
I
really
love
matters, what
that.
really doesn't matter in their rubric,
I mean,
basically, or in
that's
their job
exactly
description.
right. I discovered
Yeah.
early on in recruiting that you need to have some sort of like metrics based strategy, because if you don't, then there's not any real,
Right.
you can go off the job description, sure. But if you don't have some sort of, identified
Mm-hmm.
KPIs or identified skills, then I mean, it's really easy to, not that anyone's making an excuse not to hire somebody, but it's really easy to be like, this isn't a perfect fit, Yeah. That's,
Right. Right. Exactly.
no, go
And I
ahead.
also think it kind of ties into training.
I want to
Sorry, go
hear
ahead.
more.
I'm just sorry. Go ahead. I think also it ties into training where, like, again, like, thing that we do that I think is kind of an interesting like incentive is, and I mentioned we staff for free if they're entry level, and so a lot of employers, it's like almost reverses their own psychology. Like, do I really need some of that
Yep.
experience, or can I like I'll get a free person if they're entry level, I can train them myself, or do I want another person train them for me? And I think a lot of times, psychologically, you realize a lot of roles could be entry level because like can you offload the burden of training to an agency or to yourself? Often yourself is probably good enough. And so and what's good because we know like economically incentives are aligned where like what is scarce in the world is super skilled talent. But there is an
Mm.
absolute abundance
Yeah.
of young college kids who just need jobs and they will do anything. And so like you charge the market is pricing at it, right? Like, so if the supply of college kids with no experience is super high, the price should be super, super low because it's a commodity. Whereas, what you really should be paying for is, okay, in this one case, you need this one lead engineer with pictures of experience who worked at, defense primes in the past, has a PhD. In that case, yeah, like pay for what you're getting. But in the case of young entry level roles, those aren't differentiated. So you really should have a much lower barrier to entry if you're willing to kind of take that risk on, and like you should kind of
Yeah.
reap the
No,
reward
I
of a
mean, it
lower
is.
cost
It's just kind of
overall
a
for the
supply
model.
demand function when you think about it. Interesting.
Yeah. I also think I'm now just putting my thoughts out there, but like I think a lot of people I've talked with, I think there's a weird gap between colleges and employers where like again, so many employers tell me like they cannot find like any warm bodies to like work. But like I know for a fact there are like 6,400 warm bodies like next door who are like looking for work. And I think companies like Handshake should be solving this where like they're posting jobs, but like for some reason, I think, I think why recruiters still exist is there's always the value of having a human being to like just talk and vet someone to make sure they're actually,
They're not serial
they're like
killers.
socially, well adept, and they can, they're not going to be. Exactly. That's a nice way of saying. Nicer way of saying it is they're not serial killers, basically. But yeah, I always wonder like how do we make that gap more seamless? Because I think it's like a huge gap today, and it's bad for like everyone. Bad for employers, students, and the country. Like the country loses productivity because we don't have enough
Yeah.
people because
No,
people aren't
I do know. I mean,
allocated
it's like
effectively. You know.
drives me insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
of course,
Well, no,
it's your
I
whole
don't think
life's
that
mission. So
most
of course
people
you
do.
understand.
I
I'm
don't
just
think that they
throwing it
see
out there
that. They're
basically.
just kind of like,
Yeah.
it's very much like who can we pass this off to so we don't have to do anything.
And it's a recommend, I guess. Yeah, it's almost like you're like amateurizing your HR department from other company, but I do see a value of like, there's certain core competencies recruiters have that it's hard to build in-house talent for that. And unless you're like a corporation, like, if you're like an Anduril size company, you don't need a recruiter because you have like a people team that's like massive. And that makes a lot of sense. But it's like, unless you can afford the fixed cost of like an entire people team, it probably is actually cheaper economically just to work with an outside company because it's just like, you don't want to have to get up a whole department to vet workers if you don't even have like the capital to do so. So I think that's actually why probably startups in my case and also medium companies need this the most because like if you're a big
No.
company, you don't really need. I don't think you need help as much
No,
as
but
say a small company does
I
because
will
you
tell
already have
you
your own
what
internal systems
Anduril
for
is
that.
doing that no one, again, when you're talking about like these legacy manufacturing companies out there that are still like, oh, we can't find anybody. Did you
Right.
see their hiring campaign that they did? Don't work at Anduril. I love that so
I'll tell you
much.
why. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
That
I
was
know.
one of the sickest campaigns I've ever seen for
I
hiring.
know. Well, I think actually a good lesson. I think it's such a great. It was an. I love Anduril. And I think one of the lessons that I think I took from that is like a person is it actually isn't hard to find good talent if you can convey your company's mission as a mission, basically. Like, I think everyone wants to be part of something like special. Like, no human being wants to be a cog in the machine. Everyone wants to believe that their company has a mission. And Anduril, in certain ways, probably like they're
No,
probably
they have a
actually no
lot,
different
yeah,
from
in
Lockheed in
common.
many ways. Like structurally, as a company is built, like the same factories, the technology, the same talents, but like the messaging of how you portray what you do. Actually, what I'll say, I think actually Lockheed is great also in marketing. I think like the defense primes are good at marketing. So is Anduril. But a lot of companies, like the work they do is important and cool, but if they just simply convey that to people, like why is your work meaningful? Would you rather, be a mindless drone in office or like shape metal all day? I think people prefer the second one, but the narrative is not expressed for whatever reason. And so you're right, like a lot of talent isn't about like they don't exist. It's like, how do you tell a story
No,
that conveys why this is actually worth
it's so all of
engaging
that.
with?
I mean, it hits so many levels, and I mean, I would love to. I guess like my dream job when I grow up, John. I would love to like work on some sort of like marketing campaign like that. That is designed for talent because a lot of again, I mean, just no one's doing it, and we need to put more emphasis on all these smaller businesses,
Right.
and we need to work with our marketing departments to come up with cool stuff like that for sure.
And I think one thing you see as well is that like the same reason, like the U.S. Army, they actually recently with recruiting, but in general, like it isn't that hard to recruit for say like a military because there's an inspiring mission behind it. Like you're serving your country. Like no one questions it's like a noble cause and a worthwhile endeavor. But in many ways, like whereas you couldn't say that for like being a lawyer. No offense to lawyers. Like you couldn't say a lawyer serving your country. Like in many ways, you're actually
It's not
actively
wrong.
hurting the
You're not
country.
wrong.
No offense to lawyers.
So
But the flip side is, the manufacturing industry base is probably like one of the like most crucial elements. If I do anything like energy manufacturing and materials are three most important industries in like any country for just national security and national dominance. So like if you could rephrase your company as we are helping secure national security by providing this crucial part that people need, that's like a very inspiring mission people can get behind. Like, I'm not just doing a mission job. I'm actually like, helping serve the country doing X, Y, Z thing. And I think you tap into a group of people who are all looking for meaning and can't find it. I can tell you, like, I think like truly today, like you say, like back to the question of like my kind of like workforce expectation. I think I am not unique in that, like, at least among like people who say are more Gen Z. My biggest goal for a company was not at all. It's like it was purely like mission driven, like a company that I feel like has a cool mission that I'm excited about. And so like for me, Palantir is a no-brainer. Palantir's mission, when I applied there, they were, doing hurricane relief, breaking up, sex rings, breaking up terror cells. Like, and to this day, they're still doing all of that. They're doing like their mission is so obviously meaningful that it would be like laughable to not like buy into that. And like when you're a young person, you're like traveling the country, going to factories, helping them like set up, like this huge campaign to upskill like workers using these new tools. That's really fun, and really exciting. And I think a lot of companies, if you did a better job telling a story, would have no issue with talent. But it's because it's so hard to tell. You're saying earlier about marketing, telling a story, that like a lot of companies just can't express why the work is cool. And the issue is that people like,
Yeah.
the BlackRock, like the financiers, their work is actually bad, but
I
they're
love
good at telling a
that,
story,
right?
so no one knows how evil their work is.
I noticed
They're like
that.
actively buying up all of the land in the U.S. and people are like
I
dying to
noticed
work
that.
there because they're good. They're good. I know. That's probably a conspiracy theory. I'm probably gonna get like probably get like blacklisted for this for saying that on the podcast, like because I'm like, oh my god, he's like, but like I read some articles. I think the evidence is pretty stark in the favor of BlackRock is probably not a net good for the U.S. Whereas like but they're good at telling a story. They're good at explaining what like why it's cool to work here, and then it's crucial. There's obviously
Yeah.
also like the salary component of like they can just pay more money because they're just evil. But I think people would always
Yeah.
take a pay cut, to do something that was more meaningful in their lives. Actually, no, they do. Like I have a great friend who didn't go to. She was in college, dropped out to be a chef
Huh.
because she would
Yeah.
rather be a chef than work behind a screen all day. You know, and it's funny because I was thinking to her now, like, you probably make way more, a lot more money as a machinist you would as like a chef. And then there's a lot of people like that in my generation of Gen Z, like, people who would literally rather be baristas and have like a job where they're like on their feet than be behind a desk. And so if you can tap into that
Yeah.
zeitgeist,
Well, I love
you'll
that.
have
I
no
love
issue
how
with
like
talent at all,
passionate you
basically.
are about the work that you're doing and the industry in general. That's exciting for me to see that being, I've been doing this for 10, 15 years now. So, when I'm seeing like that renewed passion, I'm just excited. I'm like,
Right.
yes, I love it. But from your perspective, how did you get into all of this? Why were you inspired to start Standard Data?
Yeah, it kind of ties back, I think, from way early in the conversation, but I didn't bring it up that much. Basically, like when I was at Palantir, my one, like what I asked for was to be on projects. So the way Palantir are structured is basically you build essentially mega projects for big companies. So you're usually building extremely complex software tools for large companies who need like, a variety of novel use cases. And I really wanted to be working on what I saw as like real things. And so my first task was actually industry of mining, and so we were working with a massive company in
Yeah.
mining. Again, I don't want to say the name or not, so I'll just avoid the name. But they're one of the biggest in the world. Basically, they're a huge company for mining. After that, I want to move into manufacturing. So I worked in manufacturing for over 2 years, and it was really like I learned a lot about the industry, like building software for operators in the front line. But I think the big thing I saw was like you were saying earlier, there was this constant issue with labor insecurity of they couldn't get enough talent in the door to just do the work they need to get done. And we were always looking for like one of the things I did, like we're always looking for ways to like create digital work order instructions to help workers get upskilled faster, create AI chatbots to get like a kind of like a co-pilot to help assist in their work. And we always had solutions for it. But like I could tell like the root issue wasn't actually the software. I mean, the software is like good. The root issue was there literally weren't enough people working in this space. And I looked into it more and more. What I saw was my basic like TLDR of like why is this issue today is like in the 90s, the US made a decision, which was a bad one, to kind of retreat from manufacturing and be a services economy. And we are feeling now, decades later, the pain of that. And I think a combination of, COVID, as well as, the threat of a near peer, conflict with China, makes the threat of lacking industrial base extremely real and extremely scary. I think a lot of people are realizing, wow,
Yeah.
4+ decades of retreating from this space was a really bad idea. And we should really reinvest in that. But I don't think that I don't think it's enough to simply invest in technology. I think what you say, if I had a single insight that I thought I would lean into heavily was there are plenty of companies, there's no shortage of companies working on robotics, software, et cetera, for this. What I think you're seeing a lot of is just giving people the tools and the training they need to succeed. But people, I think everyone who pitches to VCs, it's really sexy to pitch to VCs. We're going to automate everyone away and have only autonomous factories. That's a really sexy pitch for capitalists because
Yeah.
oh my God, there's no people involved. That's so much money, so much free cash flow. But then the actual the truth of it is that unless I am wildly underestimating the impact of AI and robotics, I think you're going to need smart people in the future indefinitely to work on problems, whether you're in manufacturing or whether you're in an office. And I do really think that manufacturing will be harder to automate than office work. So you're actually going to see much quicker people who work behind desks every day are going to be automated way more easily than people who work in the factories themselves, which would be a kind of weird structural, almost realignment in the US that for a long time, people were told don't work in factories. Now it's gonna be weirdly better to work in factories than working in offices because I'm rambling. My very clear point is we found a company because we saw there was this huge gap in people working on the right problems in this space. And you can always add more robots, more software. You just always are gonna need smart people to work on this stuff. If we can increase the supply of skilled people in the US, that's all we can do to kind of accelerate the country's broader progress towards kind of reindustrializing. And I think a lot of people who are really, really smart working on this problem, a lot of cool companies doing this, but all of them need talent, all of them need people, and we have to kind of give them the base they need.
No, I agree.
People to
I've
succeed
actually been
in their
reading
journeys.
a lot of different things on the point of the perception of office jobs and how that's gonna change over time and
Right.
what that looks like. But I mean, it's very true. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm gonna think more on that too.
Anything that you even add for your own industry is I think what makes recruiting intriguing to me is I see in general what I would call almost service, true service roles, not service but I mean truly waiters, waitresses, recruiters, people who are truly customer facing. I struggle to see a world where people want to automate away the human connection. I think to some degree, companies will like the fact that another person just got checked for them, this person they're currently vetting, which makes, I think, two jobs that I see as uniquely AI proof. One is people facing jobs. So whether it's lawyers, consultants, client facing roles, for better or for worse, those roles will be around in the future. People like people. I think back office jobs are in for a serious one of hurt. People whose job is to be at desk all day and not talk to clients and just kind of do their work. I mean, I don't know if it'll work or not, but I see companies every day going at the throat for back office jobs. I mean, every company I see on LinkedIn from freaking SF is just attacking some variation of back office automation for X role, and that is a very scary for a lot of workers. Where if your job is just creating Excel sheets all day, that's I think that's scary because I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't know that. I think one is client faces. I think is more safe just because people like people. It's a human thing. And then two, I think is back office. I think three, which is safe, is physical world things. Even though you're seeing robots that are doing really cool work, it does feel like, maybe I'm wrong on this, like intuitively, there are certain things you can automate in a factory, but certain things you just obviously couldn't. Maybe I can't imagine what it would look like to automate everything in a factory, but like my gut is like 50-50 splits. Like you'll have like things like if you just need to get a person to move this box to that machine or to label these pallets, sure, like you can automate that probably. But if you need someone who's, especially like technicians and maintenance working on maintaining these systems, those are going to be even more crucial in the future than the past. So maybe like what happens is people are less and less on like assembly line roles and more doing multifaceted, multi-tooled technician roles. We're kind of bouncing from machine to machine.
Because somebody is going to have to program the robots and maintain them. And robots, they have a lot of sensors on them. So, it's very common for a sensor to go out on a robot. And then, like, somebody's going to have to fix that. Somebody's going to have to program it. So I agree with you on that. I think that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Now we just have to get everybody upskilled and trained, and I think that's going to be ongoing in the frontline workforce. But how do you think that manufacturing companies can leverage training opportunities for the future of work?
I think honestly there's actually already a lot of great, like there'll also be more courses online and like ways to like learn, but I think like you can't replace like actually using the machines. So I think one answer is like you can always give your workforce a chance to get up to speed and use these online courses, whether it's like real pars, of CNC. It's always cool courses that they're to like actually take and learn new concepts. But if you're starting from scratch, I think what I think is missing today, like what exists today, what people argue right now is like companies can put like an 80-20 rule where employees spend 80% of their time doing the work of their actual job and 20% working on learning new concepts. It's kind of a counterintuitive, like why spend a fifth of your time not working? But I do think that like if your goal is to implement, advanced systems at a faster rate, people need to be learning constantly. People can't stop learning. So you should have like dedicated time each week for learning to make sure people are always up to speed so that you'll have a whole industry that exists and will keep getting bigger around education. I ensure there's a really quick, robust way for people to get upskilled constantly. But then two is even more intriguing to me is the idea of like the bootcamp model, which is how do you have more in-person facilities to give people hands-on training for some of these new technologies. So like, for example, Invention's a cool company where they're building, you can design an assembly line in software and then order the whole package directly and it arrives at your door. That's like really a cool idea. But what would be even cooler is like if you could actually, before you try it out, you'd have like like Invention train sites where they could come in and you actually could have people program these machines, make sure they can use them all and work on them before bringing them in so you feel confident your employees can actually use the equipment. And in general, like having better ways to give people hands-on experience with these new machinery, these new machines is going to be very, very useful. So I think we're always kind of pondering. That's like a longer term thing I have in my head, but it's not like a right now thing. It's like a 5-10 year away thing. But like building more physical training centers in the US to have more ways to get trained easily, I think is like a top national priority.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like some of these, especially like the state training facilities, they're like kind of inaccessible to a certain degree.
That's actually exactly why I'm like, you're so right. Like, and it's very frustrating. Like, and that's why I think you need a private company to do this. I think like whatever reason the government, with all their good intentions, a lot of money is going to go into this space and has not produced that much results. I think like private companies, when the goal is like you get paid per head, you're in your point of view, you want to get maximum before you get through the system. So like you want to get everyone, trained at your facility. So you'll maximize accessibility because you want everyone to get trained there. If your goal is just to like go through a process, your outcome is not people trained. Your outcome is like process checklist achieved, which are different things. And so I think a private company that operated training facilities to actually upskill workers in every state in the US would be like the end state defined. And now it's kind of like working backwards with how do you actually now build that system so you have really, that process in place, basically.
So here in Alabama, here in northern Alabama, we have this training facility over in Tanner. which is south of Athens. It's like a robotics park.
Right.
And it's like got all the cool robots in it. It's not open to, you can't
That's really
go
cool.
in there.
Yeah.
Like the only customers, like really the only people that they have. So they work directly with employers and then their employers, the employers send their techs there for the training. But I mean, it's not accessible to the public at all.
Yeah, I think it's actually uniquely the wrong strategy. Like that's like uniquely incorrect. Like they chose the exact wrong approach. Like because I see why they did that, but they've added double boot. The outcome should be anyone can get trained at a facility, and now you have this abundant talent pool versus you go through a whole hiring process, then they get trained. For the employer, it's worse economically because you're paying someone on the job to get trained versus in a boot camp model, someone gets trained on their own time with their own like deferred payments, and they get hired after.
We should
like
do this, John.
I don't know why people aren't doing this more. It feels like to me pretty interesting. So actually, our current goal is exactly that. It's like, how do we set up facilities to actually do this? Because I think it's crazy who aren't doing it right now. It has to be done. Someone has to do this thing. And even beyond like robots, like even like, for every industry, whether it's welding, machining, robotic programming, even like composite materials, like you always need people with these super niche skills that are so hard to find. But you told any job seeker, you'll get trained for 14 weeks on this skill and you get hired immediately after. Anyone would say yes to that. That's like a brainer slam dunk.
Yeah.
The question is basically how you get the capital to finance these things. That's a good, that's just a question of financial engineering, basically.
Some of that NGO money, and that's what I would do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or thinking about it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I almost think that like
it's true.
The risk of government grants is that they're too slow, and like they're too like again like I think you could get them for sure. I would almost wonder like how could you like debt finance this thing? How could you actually just like because the pro of this and not like say a true startup where you're doing like if you're like a technology like carbon capture could totally fail. No one knows how it'll play out. So makes sense that venture capital is all about like there's no like debt owed after. If your company blows up, it's like not really it's not no one's fault basically. It's just a failed experiment. But a boot camp model would be uniquely low risk in that like we know the demand is there, the people are there. We just have to build the actual facilities to get this thing going, basically.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. But we'll have to think more on that for sure. Yeah.
And there's a lot of things to plan between what I just said and what actually has to happen, but I see it as like a long-term kind of roadmap. But
it
definitely
is a side quest, but it is
worth a quest worth going on, basically. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, John, this has been such a great conversation today.
Exactly.
For those that are listening into the show and they want to get in on the action and excitement, what is a good point of contact for you?
I mean, anything. I would say phone, email, LinkedIn. What I can do is I can just give you my number and my email and put in the bio or something. And then my LinkedIn as well. I can say anything you want. Just feel free to hit me up. I'm always on. I'm always eager to kind of meet people.
Awesome.
So yeah, feel free to give me a text, give me a call.
Well, thank you all for tuning into this week's episode of Workforce 4.0. Make sure you give John a follow. He is going to be doing some amazing things because we are launching the bootcamp thing at some point.
Exactly. We're currently just doing staffing, and hopefully eventually we'd launch more intriguing initiatives.
And if you're going to be at Automate, make sure you connect before the event. Awesome. Well, thank you, John.
Amazing. Awesome. And thank you. Appreciate it. It's a pleasure.